Let me see what are the options. Well, okay, this one looks good. It's even on a discount. This looks quite nice and clean. This one as well looks pretty serious. So let's just add these to the cart, yeah? So that we're gonna have a nice packaged gift to give Blizzard. Because, you know, the question for today is what the fuck is going on with Blizzard's balancing and just quality assurance before releasing a product, in this case, product patch 11.0.5. Because the release of this patch has been horrendous, to say the least, in terms of the problems caused by the patch and just in general the amount of bugs. If you have checked and taken a look at, for example, the results right now at the beginning of the patch in terms of damage, here is how it looks for Outlaw Rogue. Those are the results of the top damage, for example. Even if you go in the rankings, you know, it's not that often that you see Outlaw Rogue just dominating all of the fights. And in the case of Outlaw Rogue, which has this very nice and balanced look, and this is the result. And the result, TLDR, is that you go Trickster as Outlaw, you build up your capstone coup de grace, and when it's ready to go, you use this on a critter, you respec back to Fatebound, and doing this will allow you to practically use every spender after each generator as if it was max combo points. This gives you an absurd amount of CDR, because the more combo points you spend, the more CDR you get, which also includes your dice roll, and the result is that you get to practically guarantee every single dice roll up for 100% of the fight. So if you ever wondered how much damage, how powerful would an Outlaw Rogue be if they had constant uptime on their dice rolls, this is the result. Another one, you might have seen clips already of this, is Elemental Shaman. You have seen it spike up, in particular when it comes to AoE. You know, even if you look at the damage rankings, we mentioned the domination that Outlaw was having in these rankings, but the only one that used to sort of poke through the power of Outlaw was Elemental in an AoE fight like Olgrax, or Elemental in an AoE fight like Broad Twister, because of the AoE damage Elemental has been able to display. In this case, it is perhaps an even worse look for Blizzard, because this isn't even a bug. This wasn't even something not working properly. This was working exactly like Blizzard wanted. The problem is, what Blizzard wanted was dumb as hell. And what makes this worse is that the recent hotfix pushed by Blizzard, which nerfs Elemental Shaman, nerfs it even in the wrong way, because it's nerfing the damage done of Lightning Rod, spreading 10% instead of 20% of lightning damage. The problem is, the damage of this reworked version of Elemental mostly comes from Ascendance. The new Ascendance, which is now not just a single target button, but an AoE button, which then becomes much more available, not as a cooldown, but as a proc through DRE, together with the changes to Tempest, making it able to overload for even more damage, and you have a gigantic amount of overflow of Maelstrom through this feedback loop of getting into DRE. So nerfing Lightning Rod isn't actually going to change much of this mega AoE power that Elemental has gotten compared to other specs. On top of this, it wasn't just Elemental Shaman that wasn't working for Shaman. Enhancement Shaman had a plethora of other issues, practically being stealth nerfed since the patch launched. And then on top of that, also, of course, Resto Shaman. Resto Shaman, this was yesterday's log on our reclear, and you can see Resto Shaman just doesn't have Ascendance working, because when you click Ascendance and you get your theoretically spread healing of Ascendance, you don't actually get to spread any healing because the button doesn't work. You had other problems for other specs. Even though it is still a terrible hero talent, you now have permanent Gift of the Sun lane when you're playing Blood Decay and Vampiric Blood fades from you. This was an already known bug in the PTR, the fact that Kill Cleave will occasionally remain active after basically fades, which means you can also keep it up on single target when you are playing in AoE. Another one very funny was the fact that Worthy Sacrifice was not putting Blessing of Sacrifice on cooldown, allowing you to have dozens upon dozens of Blessing of Sacrifice casts. Again, if you look at our latest re-clear of Nexus Princess of yesterday, if you look at the buffs of the entire raid and you search specifically for Blessing of Sacrifice, you will find that despite only having one paladin, the amount of Blessing of Sacrifices were quite a lot going on throughout the entire fight. And the bugs continue. There are still bugs for Shadow Priest, there are even more bugs for Deathstalker, Assassination Rogue. You know, they wanted to go back to their PTR days where your average hero talent for Rogue has 17 bugs. They are trying to get back to that number. And then multiple multiple bugs of bosses. You might have seen this, of course, on a Wednesday or a Tuesday in EU and NA when you went to re-clear the bosses. Multiple bosses were completely bugged, you know. Broad Twister was AFKing in front of canisters. You had Kaiveza, who was also AFK, delaying the timers even better. Silken Court was perhaps even funnier with their lovely invisible spikes that would come off, right? You're clearly in the clear here. There is nothing happening. No, there is. You get spiked anyways, which we were also able to test for ourselves, getting hit by invisible spikes on this boss. And also for Queen Ansurek, you had bugs with the lines, the web lines also basically being invisible. So you get to ask yourselves exactly what is going down with the quality assurance of Blizzard from this patch. It's not just the specs that were broken, it was also the bosses that were broken. Blizzard has fixed a few of them. As mentioned, they have nerfed Elemental Shaman. They have also already fixed the problems for enhancement as well as the ones for Resto Shaman. But we have mentioned more than these like 2 specs. There is like 10 of them currently having bug problems, and also the more egregious one at the moment, as mentioned, being Outlaw, is actually still not fixed. And also, as a disclaimer, please don't try to continue to do this. It's clearly broken. Blizzard might unironically actually time out players for doing this. But the question remains, how could it get this bad? It's also, from a progression standpoint, can be slightly annoying. For example, yesterday you had Resto Shamans having a very hard time trying to push, for example, higher keys because they were playing without Ascendance. At the same time, though, you had Elemental Shaman being completely broken in the raid. Now, for the time being, unless Warcraft logs themselves step in to just purge all of this, you are practically going to have Outlaw Rogue as the #1 result until the end of the tier, because no other spec is going to be beating this anytime soon. This might have also be used for progression. We have seen already multiple first kills on bosses like Silken Court, but also Nexus Princess, that practically were helped heavily by having an Outlaw Rogue or 2 in their progression, because, you know, this is almost like 2 DPS basically, right? 830, 415, 415, you know, it's like 2 DPS, right? So that can impact quite a lot, even if it's being nerfed soon, which in some cases this hasn't been. It can also impact progression, because imagine, for example, a guild that raids on Wednesday and a guild that raids on Tuesday, which is just calling it quits on progression, for example, because on that day Silken Court is still bugged, or Queen Ansurek is still bugged. So, you know, attempting to continue to progress when the situation is so dire in terms of bugs for this boss, but also for Silken Court and for even more guilds, of course, it's going to be Nexus Princess, then you are going to be slowing down a lot of guilds. Maybe there are guilds, for example, who don't even raid on Wednesday or don't even raid on Thursday, they just show up on Sunday when Blizzard already fixed all of the bosses in the weekend, and for them they will have lost nothing compared to the earlier guilds who will have to have delayed or just skipped altogether those Wednesday and Thursday raids, for example. So this definitely brings into question the issues we have had at the release of this patch with the tuning and the fixing of the changes pushed by Blizzard into live, the quality control of these changes. How did so many of these things make it to live in such a precarious state? Some players, of course, have already reared their heads towards the race to world first, you know, wondering how exactly did we get such a game-defining, game-changing level of patch so early. Because, okay, sure, we have the anniversary coming, right? So we can expect a big patch if the anniversary is coming and Blizzard wants to add a whole bunch of extra content for the anniversary patch. That's fine. However, what about the rest? What about all of the changes to the specs, the mini reworks, the extra balance tuning given to the specs when the patch launched live, when you had like 23 guilds 2 days ago, you know, 23 guilds killing the last boss. And you already had a quite significant balance tuning patch being pushed out. That still seems relatively early in a tier to have such a major change, because it means basically for every other guild except for 22, they are going to have major changes, for example, in their roster, right? Beast Mastery Hunter was getting shelved, was getting benched for the last couple of bosses for many guilds, because it was getting outscaled. It also got nerfed in single target, becoming weaker, meaning no real reason to bring them on Ansurek, but now they just got buffed. Now their single target damage, we have seen the damage statistics, besides the two outliers of being overpowered, Beast Mastery Hunter is back on top. So now, because of this patch, you can go back, many guilds can go back, for example, bringing a BM Hunter in. Rogues, of course, might have to go Outlaw, Shamans, of course, more Shamans, go in Elemental or just reroll into Elemental, and a series of other changes which would have made sense, you know, 2 months into the tier, 3 months into the tier for the next patch, whereas this patch seemed to have come in very, very early. So there are questions onto, was it perhaps rushed, and this is the reason why we had so many bugs and just problems in the patch, because it was attached to the anniversary of the game, so they had to be crammed in without enough time to actually properly test them, and this is the result. That is the question for today, and either way, whichever answer we're going to get is not going to be a good answer, because the quality and the state with which this patch has been delivered has been quite poor. Definitely not up to the standards that you would expect from this level of a company, which after all has been having a pretty good set of releases and pretty good set of patches in recent memory. However, this one is a big L on Blizzard. So, hoping, of course, this will not repeat itself anytime soon, we are now, for today, on this Thursday, leaving each other. So, with this out of the way, we are starting the goodbyes by thanking everyone for having watched the video, of course, but also for supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching, see you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, we are halfway there, you know, it's starting to get almost cold enough for me to put on a second pair of fluffy cotton socks. Not yet, though.